Yes.
We have a meeting with Ms. Maria Stylianou-Lottides, Commissioner for Administration and Protection of Human Rights. In Cyprus, we call also ombudsman, or in the case of Ms. Maria, ombudswoman, maybe. Welcome, and thank you for accepting Vesni Kipra request to have an interview. I will come straight to the first question because we want to make this interview as much useful to people as possible. And we need to know about the institution of Commissioner of Administration. It was introduced 30 years ago. And I would like to know how the duties of the commissioner and how the priorities were changed over this time.
Thank you very much for the invitation. My pleasure is mine to start with. And as the institution, yes, the Ombudsman institution was established in 1991 with the main competence to examine individual complaints regarding decisions or actions taken by public authorities as to whether these decisions or actions violate the provisions of law, the human rights of the complainants, or the principles of good administration and proper behavior. It's true that since then, additional competences have been assigned to our institution. Specifically, since 2004, with the Cyprus accession to the EU, the commissioner competence was extended to also act as the country's equality body, assigned with the responsibility to combat discrimination in Cyprus. Also, more recently, our mandate was further extended to act as a national human rights institution with accreditation by UN in 2015. In order to make systemic interventions for the promotion, protection, and respect of human rights in Cyprus. Furthermore, we also act as a national mechanism for prevention of torture, SNPM, under the OPCAT. As an independent mechanism for monitoring the implementation by the states, the UN Convention for People with Disabilities, and as a national mechanism monitoring the forced return of the migrants. All these competences, alongside with the main core of Ombudsman institution since 1991.
A lot, even the list, even just mentioning all of them, that's already impressed. And you can help people in case of discrimination and to public, and not only to public, but to private sector as well.
Yes.
People who work in private sector. But how do you help? For example, imposing a fine or sending a note to this company, or I don't know, opinion, recommendations. And can you give examples of a couple of examples of different situations when you help people in the case of discrimination at work?
Okay. Imposing a fine is the last choice. You know, we start with the interventions, we start with the recommendations and suggestions, and if the private sector or the public sector or the competent authority does not follow our suggestions, then the fine follows. But in many times our interventions have a good outcome for the complainants. We have done a number of interventions regarding discrimination cases on the basis of various grounds like racial and ethnic origin, religion, sexual orientation, disability, of course, many interventions, and gender. Some examples of recent interventions or cases of discriminations I can refer to the one we drafted in March 2020. We drafted a report after an own initiative investigation regarding the racial discrimination of a color football player who was verbally abused during a football match from players of the opposite team and other persons in the stadium. It was very sad, this incident. And in the report, we stressed the responsibility of the state to apply preventive and combative measures in respect to racial incidents and also to protect victims of such incidents. Relevant recommendations were submitted to the police and the Cyprus Football Association, of course, in order to take positive measures to combat this kind of incidents. Also in October 2019, a video was posted and made viral showing 3 Cypriot women racially assaulting a Russian woman, permanent resident of Cyprus, on the basis of her ethnic background. We made a public statement about the incident, in which we strongly condemned the verbal assault against the victim, and we corresponded about the case with the chief of the police and share our views regarding the need to investigate and examine the incident as a hate crime. Finally, we informed that the police examined the case under the supervision of the Specialized Police Office Against Discrimination, and that the perpetrators were persecuted under the law, which provides for combating certain forms and expressions of racism and xenophobia by means of criminal law.
What does it look like if somebody behaves like this? How do they punish? How can they be punished by the law?
It can be prosecuted before the court, criminal court, and in this case, it was imposed a fine against the 3 Cypriot women that they were assaulted the Russian woman.
I want to also continue with this human rights. Sorry to interrupt you with this, but I know that recently in your commission there are some applications regarding these restrictions on the right of education, on the free movement, on the right to avoid any body interventions and whatever. Some people find these measures unlawful and disproportionate. How do you handle these cases? What's your position as a commission on this matter?
As a commissioner, as an ombudsman institution, yes, and as an HRI also, we're acting both ways, depending on the complaints, of course, and the human rights violations. And okay, so I assume that you are referring to the various measures taken by the states to control the spread of the pandemic. Okay, yes. Well, as you have already know, I assume that you know that these issues are very difficult and complex issues in evaluating these measures from a human rights perspective. We have to balance the personal civil rights restricted, like the freedom of movement, on the one hand, and on the other hand, the fundamental right to health, and the resulting obligation of the state to take positive measures to safeguard public health. So we have to balance between these two. And it's true that we have received many complaints regarding the restrictive measures taken to combat the pandemic. Generally, we approach these complaints. Our approach to these complaints is to assess as to whether the measures taken are legally based, timely evident, proportionate, and of course, not non-discriminatory. We give, of course, special emphasis to the protection of rights of people in situations of vulnerability. In view of the above, we did a number of interventions for the protection of the rights of specific vulnerable groups during the pandemic. And I can give some examples. We made interventions on the protection of women's maternity rights during COVID-19 pandemic with a positive outcome by the competent authorities. The return of children with disabilities back to schools after the easing of the COVID-19 measures. The measures that needed to be taken on all the people, facilities, and the psychiatric hospital, both for staff and the patients. Interventions on the granting of special permits to enter Cyprus to people who are in long-term relations with his Cypriot citizens or permanent residents in Cyprus, with a positive outcome as well. And of course, intervention regarding the living conditions of asylum seekers in reception centers, including the measures or lack of measures taken to protect them from COVID-19. These some of our interventions. Was also intervention regarding the issuance of social benefits. And
yes, the issues of unpaid social benefits. I know it's not
benefits,
about, it's about human rights. It's maybe not about administration, but some people did not get their pension or their sick leave from the last year, and of course have restrictions with what means they could leave. Could you please explain, if somebody wants to contact you, what he or she needs to do? Is there any formal procedure, or they can just call somewhere? Where?
Yes. Well, we have an open door policy. Anyone can contact in any way. There is not a specific formal procedure in respect to filing a complaint to our office. But we do need to receive some form of written submission. This can be done via email or letter through regular post or fax. And messages sent to any of the office's social media are also considered as complaints. I'm receiving a lot of complaints on my personal email, my personal accounts and messenger. I can forward them to my colleagues, of course. And under normal circumstances, the public can also visit the office during the working hours and receive information and assistance to file a complaint. And also anyone can contact the office via phone and receive information on how to submit a complaint. We are
a lot of ways, but I was impressed
a lot of ways
to contact through social media, because
yes,
many people know how to formally address or apply. They would rather call or message, and that's very good that you have this opportunity for them.
Yes,
right.
Yes,
so,
in any way.
If you would summarize all the activities of the National Human Rights Institution, what would you say? And in the end of our interview, I would like also to know how many people apply to your office every year, and how many cases do you successfully handle?
Okay. Okay, as I said earlier, our competence as a national human rights institution is to make systemic interventions and take actions for the promotion, protection, and respect of human rights in Cyprus. We regularly make such systemic interventions and submit specific recommendations to implicated public authorities on how to improve their policies and the institutional framework in which they operate, in order to ensure the protection of human rights for all people who live in Cyprus. On such important interventions that I can mention is the systemic report we did in 2019 and in 2020 in relation to the framework of domestic work in Cyprus. We highlighted the main problems that the domestic workers face, especially because they live with their employer and therefore highly dependent on them. Also worth mentioning are recent interventions regarding the respect for religious freedom and cultural heritage, the living conditions of Roma community living in Cyprus, and the conditions in the two reception centers for asylum seekers in Kofinu and Kokino Trimithia. Of course, apart from preparing written recommendations on systemic issues, we also regularly take actions for the promotion of a culture of respect human rights in Cyprus. In this framework and in cooperation with Cyprus Police Academy, officers of our institution regularly give lectures and recommendations and presentations to police officers regarding their obligation to respect and protect human rights of all citizens without discrimination. The office receives approximately 2,500 complaints per year.
Wow.
And in many cases, yes, and in many cases, a positive outcome is reached for the complainants. For example, our intervention complaints related to delays in issuance of resident permits or issuance of social benefits frequently led to the positive resolution in the case.
For our readers, especially these residence permits are important, because if they delayed like 9 months, and then you need to go already apply for the next one, but you still did not get the first one.
The first one. Yes, it's a big issue, and we try to intervene and to have the outcome as soon as possible. We reach the competent authorities in many ways in order to push them to give an answer as soon as possible, and the complainant to receive the answer that he deserved.
Very important for us. And in conclusion of this interview, what would you say for the Russian-speaking community? There are a lot of residents and there are a lot of citizens of Cyprus who speak Russian at home. What would you address them with?
Well, I would like to express my readiness to Russian-speaking citizens and residents in Cyprus to examine any issues or problems that they face and follow under my competences, of course, but also to reassure them that they can rely to our institutions to assist them in enjoying their rights without any discrimination. I want to make it clear that I'm here to hear and give a voice to the voiceless. I'm here for every person that resides in this land, my motherland. I'm here for all.
Thank you very much. That's a very good statement at the end. It touches the hearts.
The pleasure is mine. Thank you very much as well.